so far. All right, so for today's lesson, our grade 7 English lesson, we'll be focusing on adverbs, right? And before we continue, we're going to the aplusstudents.ca. Once we've gone to aplusstudents.ca, then you're going to log in with your username as well as your password. You're going to scroll down. All right. So then once we've logged in with our username and our password, then we're going to select the subject of language arts. And then we go to grade 7. All right, so once we have selected the subject of language arts, grade 7, and then we're going to scroll down to the chapter of adverbs. We're going to select adverbs, the chapter of adverbs, and the lessons that we are focusing on under the chapter of adverbs is identifying adverbs, form and use comparative and superlative adverbs, well, better, best, badly, worse, or worst, and transitions with conjunctive adverbs. So that is going to be our, let's say, our focus lessons for today, which is under the chapter of adverbs. All right, so we're going to start. So an adverb is a word, right, that describes or modifies, or we can say tells us about a verb. It also describes or modifies an adjective or a basically another adverb, right? So it tells us how, when, where, to what extent, or to what degree, right? So an adverb is a word that describes or modifies a verb, an adjective, or an adverb, right? And it tells us how, tells us when, where, to what extent, or it tells us to what degree, right? So that is an adverb. So some of the adverbs, they basically tell us how, right? So how you basically say how something is done. So it is either softly, quietly, splendidly, hurriedly, badly, and so forth, right? So some adverbs, they tell us how. And these adverbs usually end in ly. So adverbs that tell us how, they end in ly, or they usually end in ly. So how well does she play the accordion? This is now the question, right? So how well does she play the accordion? She plays the accordion splendidly, right? Which means that splendidly tells us how well she plays. She plays splendidly, and as you can see, it ends in ly. Some adverbs, they tell us when. For example, when will he perform? He will perform soon. So when will he perform? He will perform soon. Tomorrow, later. So those are all adverbs. And in this case, soon tells us when. So it doesn't have to be like soon as in Wednesday, 5 o'clock, 3 o'clock. No, it can be soon, can be later, can be tomorrow, right? These are all adverbs that tells us when. Then we have some adverbs that tells us where. Where did she go? She went downstairs, right? So downstairs, it tells us where she went, right? So it doesn't have to be to the park, to the year, to Cape, to like a city, another province, another state. So you don't have to say any of those. You can just mention things like downstairs, or so on, outside, right? That also tells us where. Then we have some adverbs that tells us to what extent or to what degree. So to what extent or to what degree. An example of that is, to what extent or degree is he reasonable, right? He is not reasonable, right? Not basically tells us the extent or the degree, not, which means that he is not reasonable at all. All right. Oopsie. So yeah, if we now look at, yeah, it says, okay, let's go to the next one. They don't give us a few sentences over here. All right, let's look at this sentence. It says, I have already decided that I will not embarrass myself again by entering another talent competition, right? So if we look at the sentence, it says, I have already decided that I will not embarrass myself again by entering another talent competition, right? Which means that we need to choose three adverbs. So we're going to choose three adverbs. So yeah, it's already highlighted, right? Already, not, and again, right? So yeah, they say already, it is an adverb that describes the verb phrase, which is have decided, right? So already, have decided, right? And then not and again basically tells us to what degree, right? So not and again are adverbs that describe the verb phrase will embarrass, right? So which means that to what degree will you do something, right? Will embarrass, so basically not. And then we also have again, which is a an adverb, right? The engineers carefully secured the dynamite in the abandoned building and moved far away. So the engineers carefully secured the dynamite in the abandoned building and moved far away. So one of the adverbs that was already selected is carefully. And carefully is an adverb that describes the verb secured, right? So how it has been secured carefully. So how carefully, right? The next one is far and far away. So far is an adverb that describes the way, like the adverb away, right? And away is an adverb to describe the verb moved, right? So these are adverbs that we have identified within the sentence, right? Which is carefully, far, and away, which is far away. So where, far away. All right. I am almost certain that I left my jacket outside on the porch. So I am almost certain that I left my jacket outside on the porch. So we need to choose two of the adverbs within the sentence, and it's already highlighted for us, which is almost and outside, right? Then almost is an adverb that describes the adjective certain, and outside that tells us where is the adverb that describes the verb lift, right? So those are the adverbs that we have identified within that sentence. All right, so before we go on to our test, right, we say that an adverb, it's a word that describes or modifies a verb, adjective, or another adverb, right? And it tells us how, when, where, to what extent, or it tells us to what degree. And also a few examples of adverbs, right? Specifically, adverbs that tells us how is slowly, rapidly, clumsily, badly, diligently, sweetly, warmly, or sadly. And we said that most of the adverbs that tells us how it ends in ly, right? And here again, they're just basically giving us the definition again. It is a word that tells us more about the verb, adjective, and adverb by answering one of these five questions, right? Adverbs, they either tell us how, they either tell us when, where, how often, or to what extent, right? To what extent or to what degree. For example, how, right, can either be angrily, hungrily, or any of these words that we mentioned here that ends in ly, right? Then we have when, adverb that tells us when. Can either be yesterday, can be tomorrow, it can be soon. Where can be here, there, outside, right? How often? Always, never, sometimes. To what extent? Almost, very, or even no, right? So these are all adverbs. All right, so now we're going to our test on identifying adverbs. All right, so we need to select the three adverbs within these sentences, right? So three of the different words have already been highlighted within the two options. We need to choose the best option. My landlord, who is amazingly handy, just fixed my leaky faucet and promised to repair my stove tomorrow. So my landlord, who is amazingly handy, just fixed my leaky faucet and promised to repair my stove tomorrow. So the first option, right? The three adverbs or the three words that has been identified is amazingly, just, and tomorrow. And the second option is just, leaky, and tomorrow. So we need to choose the correct adverb within the sentence. All right, so if we choose the one of these options, right, let's choose the first one, right? And the first one is correct, right? Because amazingly, it also tells us how. We need to choose two. So the two is already highlighted, right? We just need to choose the best option. The first option is the donuts that I purchased yesterday were too stale to eat, so I discarded them. Or the donuts that I purchased yesterday were too stale to eat, so I discarded them yesterday. So we need to choose the best option. Yesterday, or so, or yesterday and two. We need to choose the correct adverb. All right, so if we choose the two correct adverbs, then we're going to choose the first option, right? Because So if we choose the first option, oh, look at this one. So we chose the first option, right? So if you get something incorrect, right? So whenever you get something incorrect, then what happens is that you need to then go back onto either tutorial, and then you are going to then look for the correct answer. You're going to look for the correct answer. Once you find the correct answer, and then you're going to copy the link, all right? You're going to copy the link, send it to us, and then you will basically get 100 bonus points. So if ever there is a situation where you maybe get an answer incorrect, right? Because remember, with getting an answer incorrect, it doesn't mean that you don't know it. Sometimes it's just that the words, or let's say the options, can be so tricky. So if you get something incorrect, then you can go and look for the correct answer, and then you can once finding the correct answer, you copy that link, send it to us, and you will get 100 bonus points. All right. We need to select the two adverbs. My dog Astro is completely loyal to me, but my cat generally ignores me. Right? So we need to choose between the two options of either completely and generally, or completely and but. We need to choose the two adverbs, completely and generously, or completely and but. The two adverbs that we need to choose within the sentence. All right, we need to choose one of the options, and both option one, generally as well as completely, it tells us how. All right, so now we're going on to the next lesson, which is form and use comparative as well as superlative adverbs, right? So comparative and superlative, and we are now going to find out the difference between comparative and superlative. So comparative adverbs, right? It compares the actions of a person, a thing, or a group to the actions of some other person, thing, or group, right? So it's like comparing it to another person, or another thing, or another group, right? So that is comparing, right? So comparison adverbs, it compare the actions of a person, thing, or group to the action of some other person, thing, or group, right? Which means that we are comparing it to one person, or one thing, or one group. So these comparative adverbs, it is a comparison between two people, right? Then we have superlative adverbs, right? And superlative adverbs, it compares the action of a person or thing or group to the action of a larger group that is part of it, which means that you are now comparing one thing. Let's say, for example, you're comparing one person to a whole entire class, or to the whole school, right? Or you're comparing the one town to all of the towns within this big city, right? Or you're comparing this one city to literally all of the cities within, let's say, the state, right? So that is superlative, right? So comparison or comparative is where you're comparing it to one person, and superlative, it's where you are comparing it to a larger group that is part of it. And for adverbs, right, that have one syllable, right, we add er. So one syllable, we add er, right? And specifically to adverbs that compare, we add er. And we add est to a word, right, to make the superlative adverb, right? So to superlative adverb, we add est, and a comparative adverb, we add er, right? Because like I say, with comparative, we are comparing it to one person. With superlative, we are now comparing our actions to a larger group, right? It's just to more than one person, right? So which means that with comparison or comparative, we then add an er, right, to the word, and with superlative, we add est. And then they were saying if the base ends with an E, right, we drop the E before adding the ER or the EST, which means that you're not going to put double ER or double EST. You're just going to put the EST or the ER at the end of that base word. And examples that we have, right? So our base word, for example, is soon. That's the base word that stands on its own, right? Now, if we were to compare that, the comparative, then it will be sooner, right? Superlative, comparing it to a larger group, right? And then it is soonest, EST. Then we have close, comparing it to another person, place, or thing, it's closer. Comparing it to a larger group that is part of it, they are the closest, right? So these are just but an example, or a few examples of differences of comparative and differences of superlative adverbs, right? So we have our base. So with comparative, we add an er. With superlative, we add est, right? And then it also says that for most, or for, let's say, for adverbs that have more than one syllable, right, we then add more to make the comparative adverb. So with comparative adverb, we add more, whereas with the superlative adverb, we add most, right? So with the comparative adverb, we add more, and with the superlative adverb, we add most, right? So you're going to add the word either more or most in front of the word, right? For example, our base word is safely. So safely is the base word. But the comparative that has more than one syllable, right? We will then say comparative being more safely. But superlative, where we can say most safely, right? And that is how we show comparison. And for the adverb that is early, adverb early, we drop the Y. So adverb early, for example, we drop the Y and we just add IER. So you're not going to say earlier by still adding the Y. You drop the Y and you just add IER to make the comparative adverb. And we add IEST to make it superlative, which will basically end either in earlier for comparison and earliest as in it being superlative adverbs. And there we have the examples. And as you can see, the Y has been dropped. There's no Y. We just added the IER to comparative, and we added the IEST to our superlative form. All right. It says we need to complete the sentence with the correct comparative or superlative adverb. Roscoe seems to think the blank of all of my friends, right? We need to use a comparative to compare action, right? And if we were to look at the options that is given to us, right, it says this sentence compares the actions of Roscoe and all my friends, right? So if it says all my friends, then it's going to then be superlative, right? Because remember, comparative is where we're only comparing one person to another person, or one thing to another thing, or one place to another place. But in this case, they're saying to all my friends, right? Which means that it is superlative, because we said a superlative is basically where you are being compared to a larger group, right? Which is more than two people. And the actions of a person are compared to the actions of a larger group the person is part of. And we said that is superlative, right? Or superlative adverb. So since scientifically as more than one syllable, right? We adding most scientifically. So our answer is most scientifically. Roscoe seems to think the most scientifically of all my friends. As it turned out, our train left the depot much, probably later than scheduled. Yes, later than scheduled, right? And this sentence compares the action of the train in reality and the train as scheduled. The actions of two things are compared. So if the actions of two things are compared, remember we said it is comparative, right? Because comparative, it compares two things, two people or two places, right? And yet it even says, so you should then use comparative adjective. So since late as one syllable, we're just going to add E at the end, right? We drop the E and we're going to add ER, which indicates later, right? Later. Trisha, an experienced detective, questioned the suspect blank than her new partner did, right? So the sentence here compares the action of Trisha and a new partner. So if the action is being compared between Trisha and her new partner, right, it is basically between two people, then it means that it is a comparative adjective. It is comparing two people, right? And the action of two people are compared, so you should use comparative adverbs as stated. The since skillfully has more than one syllable, we are going to say more skillfully. You're not going to say skillfully. Yeah. We're just going to say more skillfully. And if we had to use superlative, we would have said most skillfully. Right? All right. Let's go to our test. We need to complete the sentence with the correct comparative and superlative adverb. The man running the antiques auction talks even, is it fast or faster than Ross does? So we need to choose the correct word. Is it fast or faster? So the man running the antique auction talks even, is it fast or faster than Ross does? This is being compared. So the man is now being compared to Ross. Fast or faster? We need to choose the correct one. All right, so the man running the antiques auction, he talks even faster than Ross does. And that is a comparative adverb. No. Lamont seems to think the, is it most scientifically of all of my friends? Or he needs to think, he thinks the scientifically of all my friends. So Lamont seems to think the most scientifically of all my friends, or scientifically of all my friends, right? And in this case, seeing that scientifically as two syllables, right? And it is also being compared to a larger group, we are going to say most scientifically, right? Because now it is being compared to a larger group, but also scientifically, it has two syllables, right? Or more than one syllable, which means that we choose most, and that is superlative. Now that I have crutches, I can move around. Is it independently than I could before? Or now that I have crutches, I can move around more independently than I could before, right? So we need to choose the correct one. So now that I have crutches, I can move around independently than I could before or more independently, right? So independently has got more than one syllable, so he can move around more independently than he could before. All right. Right. So far within the test, right, we then basically also had to choose firstly between either the comparative or superlative. And remember, we said that if it has one syllable, right, then we just add er to a comparative adverb, and we add est to a superlative adverb, right? And if it has more than one syllable, and then we add more to a comparative adverb, and we add most to a superlative adverb. All right, now we're moving on to the next one that says well, better, best, badly, worse, or worst. Remember, there's a difference between worse and worst. All right. And we say that a comparative adverb, it compares the action of a person, thing, or group to the actions of some other person, thing, or group, right? And superlative adverbs, they compare the actions of a person, thing, or group to the actions of a larger group that it is part of, right? And that is superlative. So in this case, right, the adverbs that is well and badly are irregular, right? They are irregular. So if we look at the base word, right, well, the base word well, now if we were to compare, then we don't say well or we don't say wellest, right? Because we are comparing, right? So which means that I am well, right? But now I am better, right? Or I am better than what I was earlier. So from well, if we compare that, right, then I can say I'm better, right? And superlative, right, comparing it to a larger group that it is part of, we can say best. So it's going to be well, better, best. And the same with the next one, which is badly, right? So we don't say badly, badlier, badliest, or we don't say bad, badder, baddest, or baddiest, right? So now we're gonna say badly. So I did badly in class. Shannon did worse than what I did, right? But John, he did the worst than the whole class. You see, so that is how you compare, right? So comparative is being compared to one person, place, or thing, and the superlative is either where you are being compared to a larger group or either a class or either your basketball team or your badminton team or whichever sports team, right? So I did badly, he did worse than me, right? But Jane did the worst in the whole class, right? So badly, worse, worst. All right, so now look at this one sentence. It says Mrs. Pennington gave Tim the solo because he sang it the, we need to choose one of these words, of everyone who auditioned. So which means that he is now not just being compared to one person, he is being compared to everyone that auditioned, right? Which means that it is going to be superlative, right? So it is not he sang better, he sang the best, right? So best because he is being compared to a larger group, right? Which means that he sang better than, or let's say he sang the best compared to the rest of the group that basically also came for the auditions. All right. Christine has fully recovered from her injury, and now she's skiing. Is it well than others? So well is a base word, right? Which is an irregular adverb, or it is an adverb that is irregular, right? So Christine has fully recovered from her injury, and now she's skiing than ever, right? So it means that if you comparing yourself or your progress to yourself, right, then you can just say maybe better, right? Because you are comparing how you were, like in this case, she's comparing herself to how she skied to how she's skiing now, right? So now she's skiing better than ever, and that is comparative adverb, right? It's a comparative adverb. So better is our comparative form. Maria could tell you the story, but her mom tells it. Does the mom tells it well? Does the mom tell it better? Or does the mom tell it best? Right? So Maria could tell you the story, but her mom tells it. Her mom will tell it better, right? So her mom tells it better than Maria. So in this case, it is a comparative form or comparative adverb, right? So which means that Maria and her storytelling is compared to her mom and her mom's storytelling, which means that her mom doesn't just tell it well, but her mom tells it better than Maria. All right. All right, so now if we go to our test, right, to test ourselves on well, better, best, badly, worse, or worst. We need to complete the sentence with the correct comparative or superlative adverb. The interior designer decorated our home. Is it better or well than I had expected him to? We need to choose the best, not the best, but the correct um word or the adverb in order to complete the sentence. So is it better than I expected him to, or well than I expected him to? All right. If we choose the one, then we can choose the better, right? So the interior designer decorated our home better than I expected him to, right? And that is a comparative adverb or comparative form. Joel argued this Joel argued his point. Is it well than Alec and won the debate, or better than Alec and won the debate? Right? In this case, Joel is being compared to Alec, right? Which means that it is a comparative adverb. So we are going to say better, right? Better. And it is a comparative adverb. You should ask Jonathan for directions. He knows his way around. Is it better than I do, or well than I do, right? Jonathan's direction giving is way better, or it's being compared to the person that is telling the next person. So it's a comparative adverb, right? And if it's a comparative adverb, then we will say it is better than I do. And that is a comparative adverb being compared to another person. And remember, we said superlative is when it is being compared to a larger group, right? All right, so now so far we have done the lesson on identifying adverbs. We then had to form and use the comparative and superlative adverbs. We know the difference between well, better, best, badly, worse, and worst, right? And how to also identify if it is a comparative adverb as well as superlative adverb, and when to use well, better, best, badly, worse, or worst, right? So now we're going to the last lesson, which is transitions with conjunctive adverbs, right? And transitions with conjunctive adverbs. It is words that connect two sentences or independent clauses and show the relation between them, right? So conjunctive adverbs, it can help readers understand how ideas within a piece of writing relates to one another, right? So say for example, or for instance, conjunctive adverbs. So conjunctive adverb, it can show cause and it can show effect, right? By, for example, using words like consequently, therefore, as a result, and so on, right? And remember, conjunctive adverbs are words that connect two sentences. It connects two sentences, making it, for example, sometimes it makes it one sentence, or it is just where you are either adding on or you introducing something, but it is basically being connected. It is flowing, right? So conjunctive adverbs are words that connect two sentences or independent clauses and show a relationship between them. Conjunctive adverbs can help readers to understand how ideas within a piece of writing relates to one another. And that is what I was mentioning about. It flows, right? It relates. It is going from one sentence to the other sentence, and it's already flowing from one sentence to the other. So, for instance, conjunctive adverbs can show and cause effect, where we can either use words like consequently, therefore, or as a result. It can compare and contrast ideas, right? Comparing or contrasting ideas, right? Where we can use words like likewise, however, on the contrary, and more. Or you can add information, right? And by adding information, we can use words like moreover, in addition, furthermore, right? Or we can introduce elaboration, where you can then use words like incidentally, for example, in fact, etc. Right? And remember, whenever you use these adverbs, right, it needs to also follow by the correct ideas, right? And it also needs to flow properly. All right. And in order for us to use the conjunctive adverbs, right, we need to consider how ideas within the text relate to one another and what relationships are suggested by different conjunctive adverbs, meaning relationships in the sense of are they comparing, are they contrasting, are they showing a cause, are they showing the effects of something, are they adding information, or are they introducing or elaborating on certain things? All right, so that is basically the end of our lesson on adverbs, right? Where we identified adverbs, where we had to form the comparative and superlative adverbs, right? By either adding er or est, where we added more or most to the words, where we compared or where we chose identified comparative or superlative adverbs by adding well, better, best, badly, worse, or worse, right? As well as transitions with conjunctive adverbs, right? Which is to do with sentences and joining and connecting sentences. All right, so that is our lesson on adverbs. And thank you very much for everybody for joining our lesson. I really hope that it was informative and you should have an amazing evening further. Goodbye.